It's now time for Talkin' Boxing with Billy C. It began as a podcast, went live on the net, and transformed into a full-blown empire. Across the web, on Fight Now TV, and on radio stations around the world. It's the only daily boxing talk radio show on the planet, hosted by the only guy with the balls to do it. Many have stepped into the ring. Many have tried to take the belt. And one by one, they've fallen. Another victim of the undisputed heavyweight champion of boxing talk radio. Talkin' Boxing with Billy C. is on now.
My style is impetuous, my defense is impregnable, and I'm just ferocious. I want your heart.
And we're coming at you from the Billy C. studio in Lake George, New York. I'm Bill Calogero, and it's time for Talkin' Boxing with Billy C. It's a special edition of the Talkin' Boxing with Billy C. a radio show. And joining me is our lead writer for BillyCBoxing.com, and a regular contributor to the Talkin' Boxing with Billy C. radio show, Daxx Khan. What's up, brother?
How you doing? Good afternoon, Bill.
Oh, man. I tell you, we got some good stuff to talk about right now. What I want to talk about is we have a special edition of the Talkin' Boxing with Billy C. radio show going on, and we want to talk about the second fight, which is scheduled for June 15th against Holly Holm and Sophie Mathis. It's called The Reckoning, and let's talk a little about the first fight, Dax. The first fight, we were talking about pound-for-pound supremacy and everything else in female boxing, and really going into that first fight, as far as I was concerned, there was really three female fighters that were in that discussion when you talked about pound for pound. Well, of course, Holly Holm was number one. Cecilia Brækhus was number two. And in my opinion, Chevelle Halbach was at number three. And then all of a sudden, Sophie Mathis comes from France, goes to Albuquerque, which is Holly Holm's hometown, goes in there and beats Holly Holm. Not only does she beat her, she knocks her out. Now we're talking about Sophie Mathis as being one of those pound-for-pound female fighters. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, we have no choice but to consider her now. As we always speak about with the guys, it's the guy that beat the guy. And, hey, fair play, it's the lady that beat the lady. And Sophie Mathis beat one of the ladies in her hometown with the hometown support and by knockout. We have no choice but to consider her.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. And let's talk a little about the fight itself. I got to call the action ringside, and I got to be honest with you, the feel around Albuquerque leading up to that fight, it really wasn't a matter of if Holly Holm was going to win. It was a matter of which round would she stop Sophie Mathis. And I started doing research on Sophie Mathis, and to be honest with you, I didn't see anything that stuck out at me, Dax. You know, I looked at her. She had a couple of good fights with Mariam Lamare. She did have a fight with Belinda Lacuente. I can never pronounce that woman's name. And Cindy Serrano. But everyone else on her resume were pretty much unknown fighters, at least as far as I was concerned.
Well, you know, as we're starting to see more and more, and again, because women's boxing is evolving so much, Bill, we have to compare it to the men. Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. We now have to consider him one of the top middleweights in the world, and who does he really have on his resume? Same thing with Sophie Mathis. But, you know, again, not to be, too overly comparing the women to the men, but like Chavez Jr., she's a big girl and who's able to fight in a division that's really not her size, and she's able to use that size to her advantage. And that's what she did in the first fight.
Well, you know, when I met her, I looked at her, and she's 34 years old. And I looked at her, and I thought she looked old. I thought she looked slow. She didn't look athletic. And I'm saying to myself, man, Holly Holm is just going to, destroy this girl, And Holly is known for her energy. She never runs out of gas. And for all intent purposes, she could outbox her opponent all day long. And that's exactly how this fight started. Holly Holm was outboxing Sophie Mathis. At times, Ann looked like she was frustrated a little bit. She just kept trying to cut the ring off and was plodding towards Holly Holm, and for the most part, Holly was outboxing her.
Definitely, she was outboxing. A lot of times, though, she actually snapped Ann's head back. I just rewatched that fight last night. And in that first round, especially, where there was one shot where Holly came in with a little jab. She threw that right hand, and Ann's head snapped back, and then she moved around her. She kept turning her. And for the last time, I will just make one comparison with the ladies and the men. This is the first thing I thought of originally when I watched it, too. It was kind of like Thomas Adamek versus Vitaly Klitschko. Remember, Vitaly was the bigger guy, not quite as fast, kind of imposing, but when Adamek darted in and he caught him, he was snapping Vitaly's head back.
Yeah, well, she was landing with the jab. She was landing with some power shots. And the thing is one of the knocks on Holly is that Holly outboxes fighters and stays out of trouble. And I know now I'm going to make a comparison to men. We talk about that on the show all the time with fighters like Floyd Mayweather, although he seems to have changed his game a little bit. And a lot of fight fans are critical of fighters that box and try to avoid those power shots. And Holly was no different. And I think after the fourth round, things started to turn. And I think that Holly, it was a combination of Team Holm wanted to win. They wanted to knock out the fans in attendance. It was sold out. They all were anticipating a knockout. And I think that, Dax, is when she kind of started to get out of her game.
Yes, the more the crowd got into it, I think the more amped up that Holly got, and I think she abandoned her style a little bit. But, for those, and again on the show you hear me say this all the time, boxing is called the sweet science for a reason. There's a science behind it. It's not go in there and fight. That's what you have street fights and bar pubs for. The idea of boxing is to hit and don't be hit. There's nothing, sometimes you be too brave for your own good, and Holly she's smart, and what her mistake was is she abandoned her game plan, and she tried a little bit to please the fans too much. I love Ricky Hatton style, maybe.
Yeah, well, you know what? She started to go toe-to-toe a little bit. And all of a sudden, that seemed to be Sophie Mathis's game. The punches weren't hurting Ann. They were connecting. They were leaving marks on her, but they weren't stopping her. She kept plodding forward. She kept cutting the ring off. And then all of a sudden, she started catching Holly and rocking Holly a little bit. And we started to all sense that the tide was turning a little bit. And let's fast forward it. Holly got into some trouble. And this is where, obviously, the fight ended. We know that one of our own writers wrote a piece about the referee in the first fight, who was Rocky Burke, and although she was a hometown fighter and everything else, she was in some serious trouble. And Sophie hit her and knocked her down. It was a clean punch. It was a knockdown. There was no question about it. It actually happened right in front of me. And Rocky Burke, I think, Dax, made one of the biggest mistakes that he could have made. Not only for that fight, but during his career. He called it a slip, and he let Holly Holm continue. Now, I think, Dax, that he was trying to help Holly. What do you think?
Anything's possible. We see that all the time, though, in boxing anymore. Even guys that were once stellar referees, example, Joe Cortez, nowadays it seems like, they're either favoring somebody. I don't know if they want to make sure they're being fed work or whichever the point is. But, something, forget about the referee, Bill, even though the referee is important. What about the corner? I think, and matter of fact, we talked about it on this exact fight before on the show. The corner's sometimes too brave for the fighter. When Holly went back to her corner the sixth round, I was saying to myself, they need not to let her come back in.
Yeah, I'll get to that in a second. I think what I was talking about, what I was trying to lead up to with the referee, I think in a split second, he was trying to help the fighter. And I think in hindsight, and we've seen it all the time, we saw it with Librato Andrade, we've seen it many times in fights where a referee could kind of give the fighter a little hand. And what he should have done, she clearly was in trouble. He should have called it a knockdown. He should have gave her an 8 count, count up to 8, which that they have to do. And then maybe yell at Sophie Mathis to get back in the corner, kill a couple of seconds, and then let her go back out. But by brushing her gloves off, she was in Dream Street. I don't know how she survives the round, but then, like you mentioned, she goes back to her corner. I'll tell you, Dax, I was sitting there, and I did not see Holly Holm's eyes were still glossy. She wasn't moving for the first 30 seconds of that minute in between rounds.
Yeah, she was, and her corner was frantically trying to see what they can do to revive her, but it was obvious that Holly, that was the end of it. It was obvious that as soon as Ann landed, that was going to end Holly's night, which eventually it did. But just real quick, back to the referee, not to defend him, Bill, but I've seen this, and I think we've all seen this more than once in ladies boxing as it has evolved. A lot of these referees, they don't know how to handle being a referee in a women's bout. They're not. Seems like a lot of them don't know how to separate the fact fighters from ladies, and they're trying to be like, oh, let's help this lady out instead of wait a minute, this is a fighter just like it is a man. And I think that was Rocky's mistake. I don't think it was anything intentional. That's just my personal opinion, but that's what I think. And it's not the first time I've seen it in a women's bout. Matter of fact, I've seen it last night.
No, she's a fantastic. I'm sorry. He's a fantastic referee. There's no question about it. I'm not knocking him as a referee. I just think in that particular instance, he didn't think clearly. And then, like you mentioned a few minutes ago, I put a lot of blame on Holly Holm's corner. I think her trainer, Mr. Winklejohn, should have stopped that fight, should have never let Holly Holm go out there. We all saw Paulie Malignaggi get all pissed off at Buddy McGirt for stopping his fight. But you know what? Paulie went on to fight another day and win another world championship. And I think that, Winklejohn should have stopped that fight and prevented Holly from going back out and then ultimately suffering a very severe knockout.
Sometimes that is one of the things that sometimes, Bill, why I don't like hometown fights. And sometimes I believe, whether it be in title fights or just regular bouts for contention, I really don't think anybody should have a hometown advantage, because I really think that there's a lot of pressure, whether it be on judges, referees, promoters, cornermen, to give that hometown crowd what they're looking for. And a lot of times, who suffers for it, whether it be through scoring, bad decisions, or sometimes just being braver than the fighter themselves? The fighter.
Yeah, no, there's no question about that. Okay, so we talk a little about the last fight. Obviously, it didn't end the way Holly wanted. It did end the way Sophie Mathis wanted. Now, just to get everybody caught up, apparently they had a rematch clause. They were going to do the rematch. Some things happened. One thing led to another, and then from what I understand, Sophie Mathis was actually going to fight Cecilia Brækhus, and then that fight fell apart, and then now they're back to the rematch, what everybody wanted. And the promoter of this, Lenny Fresquez, he's predicting that this fight, The Reckoning, which is taking place again June 15th in Albuquerque at the Route 66 Casino Hotel, will not only be a great fight, but he's predicting that this second fight is going to be 2012's Female Fight of the Year. And when we look at these two fighters now going in for the rematch, what do they have to do? First, let me ask you this. Sophie Mathis was very successful in the first fight. She was patient. She landed her power shots. She cut the ring off. She virtually willed Holly Holm to fight her fight. Do you think she's going to go in with the same game plan?
I think so, and I think that fight boosted Sophie Mathis's confidence tremendously, especially, as we were saying before, she beat Holly Holm, who's a pound-for-pound recognized fighter in the female division, at home. What a big, boost that is. And like we know, boxing is more mental than physical. And Sophie Mathis right now, she's soaring high. This is the highest win of her career. She beat Holly Holm at home, no pun intended. So I think she's going to come in. The only thing I think she needs to do, Bill, to make sure that she's going to assure a victory for herself this time, is pump that jab more, because Holly Holm is a more intelligent fighter than Sophie Mathis.
Now, when we look at Holly Holm, we know she can box. We know she's conditioned. We know that she's, saw this fight, whether she's watched it physically or it's definitely been run over and over and over in her mind. What is Holly going to do the second time around to basically avenge this knockout loss?
I think Holly is going to not do. I didn't say do, not do. I think Holly's not going to stand there and try and trade with her and be overconfident. I think Holly's going to go in there and do what Holly Holmes does. Moves around, moves in, gets off, moves around, and makes Sophie Mathis work. She's the bigger girl. It's harder for the bigger person to move around all night, and as we all know, Holly Holm doesn't run out of gas.
No. And I think I honestly believe, and I hate to point fingers, but I honestly believe it was a case of Team Holm. Now, I'm going to say Team Holm because I'm not going to blame just the trainer. I'm not going to blame just Holly or even the fans, because everyone involved with Holly Holm wants to see her be a more engaging. They want to see her, knock fighters out and everything. But you know what? Maybe that's just not the smart thing for her. And I think that if she outboxes, which I think she's capable of doing, I think she can win a very, like you mentioned before, a sweet science kind of a boxing match. And that doesn't mean it has to be boring, Dax. She could win very easily and land power hands, just like she was in the first several rounds of the first fight.
Absolutely. It doesn't have to be boring at all. Just real quick, as we touched before, that, the idea of the sport is to hit and not be hit. One of the all-time greats, and, just compared to the men's division again, I keep doing that because the women's division is evolving so much. Anybody remember Willie Pep? Willie Pep had great fights, but you know what? Will of the Wisp made sure he didn't get hit.
Well, that's always the key. Holly Holm definitely got hit in the first fight. Now, one other thing I'm hoping that they're going to do. One thing I noticed in that first fight, Dax, was the ring was extremely small. It looked like it was 18 by 18. Now, I didn't measure it, but it looked like it was 18 by 18 inside the ropes, which means it was about 20 by 20, roughly 20 by 20 outside the ropes. I think that they need to give Holly Holm. Now, I'm not just looking for all the advantages for Holly Holm, but Holly Holm's fight is to box. She needs a ring that's 20 by 20 inside the ropes. And you know what? Nothing for nothing, but Sophie Mathis is experienced enough. She had no problem cutting off that ring. She was cutting that ring in half and walking Holly Holm down. I think she's going to try to do the same thing this time.
With a ring like that size and as big as Sophie Mathis is, Sophie Mathis is as big as a lot of middleweights, between height-wise and what she weighs, when, day of the fight. It's very easy to walk that down. As we were talking about Chavez Jr. before, all she's got to do is step to the side, move in, step to the side, move in, step to the side, move in. And you know what? She doesn't have to be overly quick just to put that jab out there a little bit, give Holly something to think about, so Holly's a little hesitant to keep trying to circle her.
You mentioned you mentioned a very important thing, which I had never seen in any of Holly's fights before, at least the ones I've covered or been ringside for. Holly Holm was substantially shorter than Sophie Mathis. Sophie Mathis has a couple of inches on her in height, and add the strength factor. It's not a layup fight for Holly Holm, and I think this fight is in demand. Let me ask you this. We talked about the first fight. We talked about what each fighter's got to do for the second fight. Let me ask you your thoughts on this fight and the fact that it's the rematch of such a great fight that took place the first time, and assuming that the fight's going to be just as good the second time. What impact do you think it has on women's boxing in general?
I think it has a huge impact on women's boxing in general because women's boxing in other countries is more popular than it is here. As you hear me on the show every week, I talk about where all the big women's fights are in other countries. We only have a few fighters here that are popular. Holly Holmes, without a doubt, may be the most popular female fighter in the United States right now. But, now you're getting the attraction of people from other countries. And if Sophie Mathis should create a following here, what's that saying? That's boosting the profile of female boxing immensely. And it's also showing people, hey, you know what, these women can fight. We got a boxer, we got a knockout artist, and it's going to create a lot of attention for the females division, Bill. No doubt about it. This is an important fight. Yeah,
it's very important, and I think Sophie Mathis has gotten herself some fans. I know the city of Albuquerque is a huge boxing town, and they respect good fighters, and I'm sure that they're going to be excited. I'm anticipating this card to be sold out very quickly. I can't see anybody in the Albuquerque area that's a boxing fan not want to be live for this fight. As a matter of fact, I'm thinking that people that follow this sport, Dax, are going to make an effort to go to Albuquerque to see it because, I think it's going to be that good of a matchup, a rematch. And let me ask you this. Let's just I know your crystal ball's not working, my crystal ball's not working, but let's just say Holly wins a very close fight. Do we see a third one, or is this the second fight of a possible trilogy?
I don't think so. I think that Holly Holm and her team are going to, if they can get this one, they're going to walk away. If you remember, I spoke with Holly in depth before this fight, and Holly said, she wanted to retire without another loss. And Holly did tell me she didn't want to fight for too much longer. And after, that last knockout, which, as we spoke already, was a brutal knockout, I think she's smart enough to know, listen, get why the getting's good, or at least stay away from this opponent while it's good, make it evened up, and again, there's no shame in it because Ann is a big woman. She's a big girl. She's got 3 inches. She has a lot of weight on fight day. So, you can't blame her, But and Holly's not going to lose any respect because, you know what, Holly went back in the ring with her. A lot of people, if they got knocked out and beat up the way Holly did those last couple rounds, they'd avoid a rematch. Yeah,
well, you look at Holly Holm. You look at her career. Now Holly Holm, when you look at her resume, she's got a who's who on her. I mean, everybody from, Christy Martin, Terry Blair, who's a quality fighter, Mia St. John. She fought Chevelle Halbach twice and beat her twice. Mary Jo Sanders, she had a draw and a win over, the very tough Victoria Cisneros. She fought
Miriam Lemary. Yeah, she does. She has the who's on there.
Right. Ann Sakurado. I mean, she's fought everybody. So the question is who's left? The only name that people talk about is Cecilia Brækhus. However, I see Holly Holm, if she beats Sophie Mathis the second time, I do see a possible trilogy. I do see a third matchup because the question is would people rather see, especially if it's close, if it's a one-sided beatdown, then no, I would agree with you. But if it's a close fight, of course they would want to see it again. I mean, the only other fight is Cecilia Brækhus, and it seems that Brækhus, is constantly taking weak opposition. She's never, with the exception of Halbach, you look at her resume, and she hasn't fought anybody as tough as Holly has.
No, and you got who's the what's the other? How do you say her name? Balogun.
Who?
The German girl, Jessica Balogun. Is that how you pronounce it?
Oh, Balogun. Yeah, she's not even. Yeah, she's supposed to be fighting Cecilia Brækhus next, but she is not. She shouldn't even be discussed in the same breath because when you look at her resume, there's just no comparison. I mean, Holly Holm is just above everyone else when you start looking at the level of opposition and the constant wins and stuff, and that's what makes me so interested in Sophie Mathis because she overcame that. Let's face it, she was a huge underdog. I got to be honest, when I was there covering the weigh-in and everything else, I'm saying to myself, oh man, she's not going to last 4 rounds with Holly, and look what happened. So I think Sophie Mathis, she's in a win-win situation here. As long as she performs well, I do think you might see a third fight.
The money would be there, definitely. It would definitely be there.
And Brækhus is there anyway. Let's say that's the name everybody wants to see. She's there anyway after a third fight. You know what I mean? So it's not like she's going anywhere because who else does she have left? She's been picking the weaker opposition to begin with.
Most of the top female fighters are unfortunately in the weight classes below. So around the welterweight and junior welterweight division, I think we've covered pretty much everybody. So who is there left really after this? Nobody, unless by some reason maybe Chevelle Halbach can get another fight with either Sophie Mathis or Holly Holm. If not, then the trilogy would be the only logical choice for both of them. But regardless of who the winner is, Halbach would be a great fight for either.
Yeah,
especially at this stage in everybody's career.
Well, Chevy and Holly probably would never fight again. They've already fought twice, and Holly's beaten her twice. But as far as Sophie Mathis, you never know. But talking about these fighters, Holly Holm, she's a former world junior welterweight and world welterweight champion. She's considered one of the top, if not the top pound-for-pound female fighter on the planet. Sophie Mathis, she was also a former world junior welterweight champion. She's currently got the IBA and WBAN welterweight titles that will be on the line on June 15th at the Route 66 Hotel and Casino in Albuquerque. I'm looking forward to calling that fight again, Dax. Do you have anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
I just think I just want to say, you know what, this is a fight that everybody should be paying attention to. As we just spoke a few minutes ago, this fight is something that could change the scene of women's boxing, and women's boxing is going to be into the mainstream. And if this was a man's fight, this would be a pay-per-view worthy bout.
Yeah, but you know what? I look at it this way. You know, when people say, "Oh, you know, that's a great fight," you know, or that's a great woman's fight, or that's a great main event for a woman's fight.
Great fight, period.
Exactly. This is going to be a great fight, regardless, man, woman, whatever. I think that this is going to be. It does have the makings of a possible fight of the year. I know Holly Holm. You know, she has the weight of a whole city on her shoulders. She's got a lot of pride. She's going to come out at her best. And Sophie Mathis, well, she knows she's got to go back into her hometown, just like you said, and she's got to, redo something that was not an easy test to begin with. So I'm anticipating a great fight.
And I'm anticipating a great fight, too. And just to touch on that, I actually believe, if my information is correct and my research is correct, right now, Sophie Mathis is rated the top pound-for-pound fighter.
Well, that's all pound for pound. Everybody's got their opinion, and you would think that if Holly Holm was number one and Sophie Mathis beat her, and she would see the thing about Sophie Mathis is, as far as I'm concerned, she wasn't in the pound for pound ranking before she beat Holly Holm. Holly was, like I said, the top three was Holly, Cecilia, and Chevelle Halbach. I mean, in my rankings, that's the way I had them. And then now you have to put Sophie Mathis in the mix. And if you drop Holly down, so what do you got? Ann at number one, Cecilia stays at number two, Holly is at number three, and Chevelle is at number four or number five, something like that. So yeah, I mean we're solid in female boxing, and this fight right here, I think, is the creme de la creme of female boxing. Holly Holm and Sophie Mathis. It's the second one. It's called The Reckoning. Dax, I appreciate you stopping by and chatting about this. Hopefully we'll talk about it again as the fight gets closer.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about it again, and hopefully before the fight gets closer, I can talk to Holly and see what their outlook is on it.
Sounds good. Dax, I'll talk to you soon, my friend.
All right. Have a good day.
Take care. That's my man, Daxx Khan. You can check him out. He contributes on the Talkin' Boxing with Billy C radio show every single Thursday, so make sure you tune in there. You can read all of his stuff. He's got a column up on BillyCBoxing.com, and you can always drop him an email, Dax@TalkinBoxing. That's TalkinBoxing.com. Make sure you mark it down. It's June 15th. It's called The Reckoning. It's the rematch between Sophie Mathis and Holly Holm. It's going to be taking place on June 15th at the Route 66 Casino Hotel in Albuquerque. I'm going to be there ringside. We're going to be calling the action. I want you to be there, too. Hey, I'll tell you right now, if you drop us an email, Billy@TalkinBoxing, that's TALK, what, I forget how to spell it? Well, it's TALKINBOXING.com. Drop us an email. If you want to come, we'll get a VIP table. We want to set up a VIP table for Billy C listeners, and maybe we'll make it a gathering out there. So drop us an email. I can hook you up with the promoter, get some tickets. I would be there if I were you. Sophie Mathis, 26 wins, 22 coming by knockout. She's got one loss, was stopped in her second professional fight. Her biggest win was her last fight against Holly Holm. She's putting her IBA and WBAN belts on the line against Holly Holm, who's got a career record of 30 wins, 9 coming by knockout, 2 losses. She was stopped twice, once in her 10th pro fight, the second time in her last pro fight. She also has 3 draws. This is going to be a great fight. Make sure you go there. For all the information, visit FrezquezPromotions.com. I believe it's www.FrezquezProductions.com. Check it out. Hey, until next time, this is Billy C. Ciao.